The hot summer air shimmered like a mirage as Theresa Parker stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Timber Creek, Colorado, 1875. Her cramped legs barely supported her weight after the grueling 3-day journey from Denver, the final leg of a trek that had begun weeks ago in Boston. She clutched a crumpled letter in her gloved hand, the ink smudged from countless readings during her journey west. Last stop, Timber Creek, the driver called out, already unloading her battered trunk. Theresa smoothed her travel-worn navy blue dress, painfully aware of the dust clinging to the hem and the wrinkles that no amount of padding would remove. She had spent her last dollars on this journey, answering an advertisement in the matrimonial news seeking a bride for a cattle rancher in Colorado territory. All she knew of her future husband was contained in 3 letters exchanged over 2 months, a small daguerreotype showing a serious-faced man and his promise of a good home. The small frontier town bustled with afternoon activity. Men in dusty clothes and wide-brimmed hats moved purposefully between the general store, saloon, and blacksmith. A few women hurried along the wooden sidewalks, carrying baskets or shepherding children. No one paid much attention to another newcomer stepping off the stagecoach. "Miss, your trunk," the driver said, setting it down beside her. "Thank you," Theresa replied, fumbling in her reticule for a coin. She had barely enough for a small tip. "Could you direct me to the Silver Spur Ranch? I'm meeting Samuel Tucker there." The driver's eyebrows rose slightly. "The Silver Spur, that's a good 8 miles southwest of town. You planning to walk there, miss?" Panic fluttered in Theresa's chest. In his letters, Samuel had promised to meet her, but the stagecoach was nearly 2 hours late. Perhaps he had given up waiting. "Was someone supposed to meet you?" The driver asked, his tone softening at her obvious distress. "Yes, Mr. Tucker, we've arranged." She trailed off, unsure how to explain their arrangement to a stranger. "You his kin?" "Not exactly. I'm to be his wife." The words felt strange on her tongue. "We've corresponded, and I've come from Boston to marry him." Understanding dawned on the driver's weathered face. "Ah, a mail-order bride. Well, don't you worry. If Tucker said he'd be here, he'll come. Probably got held up with ranch business." A deep voice called from across the street. "Miss Parker?" Theresa turned to see a tall man striding toward her, dust rising from each step of his worn leather boots. He wasn't wearing the formal attire from the daguerreotype, but rather well-worn denims, a faded blue shirt, and a tan vest. A weathered hat shadowed his face until he removed it, revealing eyes as blue as a summer sky. "I apologize for being late," he said, stopping before her. "Had trouble with some cattle breaking through a fence line." His voice was deeper than she had imagined, his manner more reserved. "Mr. Tucker?" she asked, though she recognized him from the photograph. In person he was taller, more weather-beaten, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the sun. He nodded once, a quick dip of his chin. "Samuel Tucker, you can call me Sam." His eyes swept over her, not in an impolite way, but as if confirming she was indeed the woman he'd been corresponding with. "I'm Theresa Parker." She extended her gloved hand, which he took briefly, his palm rough against the soft fabric of her glove. "Let me get your trunk," he said, lifting it easily. "Wagon's just down the street." Theresa followed him, suddenly aware of every eye watching them. A mail-order bride was nothing unusual in these parts, but it didn't make the scrutiny any less uncomfortable. Sam's wagon was simple but sturdy, hitched to 2 strong horses. He loaded her trunk in the back, then offered his hand to help her up to the high seat. "It's about an hour's ride to the ranch," he explained as he climbed up beside her. "Roads rough in places." They rode in awkward silence for several minutes, the sounds of the town fading behind them as the wagon rolled along the dusty trail. Theresa stole glances at her future husband, trying to reconcile the man from the letters with the flesh and blood person beside her. "I hope your journey wasn't too difficult," Sam finally said, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. "It was long but manageable," Theresa replied. "The final stage from Denver was quite crowded." Sam nodded. "Things are growing out here, more people coming west every day." "Your letters mention the ranch has been in your family for some time. My father started it 20 years ago. I took over after he passed 5 years back." His hands were steady on the reins, the knuckles scarred from years of ranch work. "It's good land, cattle do well." "And it's just you running it now," Theresa ventured, though she knew from his letters that he had hired hands. "Got 3 men working for me, good men. They've got a bunkhouse near the barn." He glanced at her. "House is separate, of course, you'll have your privacy." Theresa felt heat rise in her cheeks. Their arrangement was practical. He needed a wife to manage his home, possibly bear children, and she needed security after her father's death had left her with nothing but debts. Yet the reality of what that entailed now loomed large between them. The landscape rolled by, a vast expanse of rugged beauty unlike anything she'd known in Boston. Grasslands stretched toward distant mountains, the late afternoon sun painting everything in golden light. Occasionally, Sam would point out landmarks or mention bits of local history, but the conversation remained stilted. As the sun began to set, Samuel guided the wagon over a slight rise, and Theresa caught her first glimpse of the Silver Spur Ranch. A sturdy 2-story house stood in a small valley, with a large barn and several outbuildings nearby. A corral held several horses, and in the distance, she could make out cattle grazing. It was smaller than she had imagined, but far more substantial than many homesteads they had passed. "It's lovely," she said, genuinely impressed by the neat appearance of the place. Samuel's expression softened slightly. "It's not fancy, but it's solid. Built the house myself after the original cabin got too small." He guided the wagon to the front of the house and set the brake. For a moment he sat still, as if gathering his thoughts. "Miss Parker, Theresa," he began, turning to face her properly for the first time. "I want you to understand that I don't expect anything from you right away. We're strangers still. You'll have your own room and we can take time to get to know each other before any formal ceremony." Theresa hadn't expected such consideration, and it eased some of her anxiety. "I appreciate that, Mr. Tucker, Sam," he corrected gently. "If we're to build a life together, we should at least use our given names." He climbed down from the wagon and came around to help her descend. As her feet touched the ground, he didn't immediately release her hand. "I know this isn't easy, coming all this way to marry someone you've never met," he said quietly. "If after a time you find you can't be happy here, I won't hold you to our agreement. I want that understood from the start." Before Theresa could respond, he released her hand and moved to retrieve her trunk. She followed him up the porch steps, taking in the craftsmanship of the house. It was plain but well built, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Sam set down her trunk to open the front door. He paused for just a moment, then swung it wide and stepped back. "Welcome home, Theresa," he said, the simple words carrying a weight of expectation and hope. Theresa crossed the threshold into what would be her new life, the floorboards solid beneath her feet. The interior was clean and functional, with simple but well-crafted furniture. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and windows let in the last golden light of day. "It's not what you're used to in Boston, I expect," Sam said, bringing in her trunk. "It's wonderful," Theresa replied honestly. After months of boarding in increasingly shabby accommodations as her funds dwindled, the sturdy, spacious house felt like luxury. "You built this yourself." Most of it had help with the stonework. Pride colored his voice as he gestured around. "Kitchen's through there, bedrooms upstairs. Thought you might want to wash up after your journey. I'll show you to your room." He carried her trunk up a narrow staircase to a bedroom at the back of the house. It was simple but comfortable, with an iron-framed bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. Curtains framed a window that overlooked the distant mountains. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall," Sam explained. "Got running water piped in from the spring last year, cold but clean." "That's very modern," Theresa said, genuinely impressed. "Try to keep up with improvements when I can afford them." He set her trunk at the foot of the bed. "I'll let you get settled. Supper in about an hour." Left alone, Theresa sank onto the edge of the bed, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. She was hundreds of miles from everything familiar, in the home of a man she barely knew, preparing to become his wife. The weight of it pressed on her chest, making it difficult to breathe for a moment. Yet as she looked around her room, she felt a curious sense of possibility. This house, this land, This man, they represented a fresh start after the disasters that had befallen her in Boston. Her father's gambling debts, the shame of near poverty, the increasingly desperate suitors who had seen her only as damaged goods to be acquired cheaply. She unpacked her meager belongings, changed into a fresher dress, and used the basin to wash away the dust of travel. By the time she made her way downstairs, she had composed herself. She found Sam in the kitchen, placing a cast iron skillet on the stove. He looked up as she entered, and for a fleeting moment, she caught an expression of genuine appreciation in his eyes before his usual reserve returned. "Hope you like venison," he said. "Got some potatoes and beans to go with it." "Can I help?" she offered. He hesitated, then nodded. "Could set the table if you'd like, plates in that cupboard." They worked in silence for a few minutes, the unfamiliarity between them palpable. Theresa found plates, cutlery, and cups, arranging them on the solid oak table while Sam tended to the cooking. "Smells delicious," she said as the aroma of venison and herbs filled the kitchen. "Nothing fancy, just what works out here." He glanced at her. "You cook?" "Yes, though I'm more familiar with city dishes. I'd be glad to learn what you prefer." "Reckon we can figure that out together," he replied, the hint of a smile touching his lips. Over dinner, the conversation began to flow more easily. Sam asked about her journey west, and Theresa described the changing landscapes, the interesting characters on the stage coaches, and her first impressions of the frontier towns. "What made you decide to come west?" Sam asked as they finished their meal. "Your letters mentioned your father's passing, but not much else." Theresa hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal about her circumstances. "After my father died, I discovered he had substantial debts. Our house and most possessions had to be sold. I took work as a seamstress, but—" She paused. "Boston has little opportunity for a woman alone." Sam nodded, understanding more than she had said. "And what made you answer my advertisement specifically?" "You were honest," she said simply. "You didn't promise riches or luxury, just a good home and fair treatment, and you mentioned books." This drew a genuine smile from him. "Got a small collection, nothing like what you'd find in Boston, I expect." "I'd love to see them," Theresa said earnestly. After clearing the dishes together, Sam showed her to a small sitting area where a bookcase held perhaps 36 volumes. Theresa ran her fingers along the spines, recognizing classics by Dickens and Shakespeare alongside practical manuals on animal husbandry and plant identification. "It's a fine collection," she said, selecting a volume of Emerson's essays. "I had to leave most of my books behind." "You're welcome to read any of them," Sam offered. "Winter evenings get long out here." They sat by the fireplace, the crackling of the flames filling the comfortable silence as Theresa leafed through the book. Occasionally, she would read a passage aloud, and Sam would nod thoughtfully, sometimes offering his own interpretation. As the evening grew late, Sam stood and stoked the fire. "I usually rise before dawn," he said, "but you should sleep as long as you need tomorrow. It's been a long journey." "I'm an early riser myself," Theresa assured him. "I'd like to learn the rhythms of the ranch as quickly as possible." Sam regarded her for a moment as if seeing something new in her. "I appreciate that," he said softly. "Well, good night then, Theresa." "Good night, Sam." In her room, Theresa prepared for bed, her mind whirling with impressions of her first day at Silver Spur. Samuel Tucker was not what she had expected, more reserved, certainly, but also more thoughtful. She had feared he might be crude or demanding, as some of the men back east had become when they thought she was desperate. Instead, he had shown consideration and patience. As she drifted toward sleep, she found herself cautiously hopeful about the future stretching before her. Theresa woke to the sound of movement downstairs. Gray light filtered through her window, suggesting the sun had yet to rise. She dressed quickly in a simple skirt and blouse, pinning her hair in a practical bun, and made her way downstairs. Sam looked up in surprise as she entered the kitchen. He had a pot of coffee brewing on the stove and was slicing bread. "Didn't expect you up this early," he said. "I meant what I said about learning the rhythms of the ranch," Theresa replied. "May I help with breakfast?" He nodded, and they fell into a companionable routine, Theresa frying eggs while Sam finished preparing the coffee. As they ate, he outlined the day ahead. Got to check the north pasture fence, he explained. One of the hands reported it needed mending. Then we're moving a small herd to the east grazing lands. And what should I do? Theresa asked. Sam hesitated. Hadn't really thought about it. Most of the house is in decent order, though it could use a woman's touch, I suppose. There's a vegetable garden out back that's been somewhat neglected. I'll start there, Theresa decided, and perhaps take inventory of the pantry. That would be helpful. He rose from the table. I'll be back around midday. The hands eat lunch in the bunkhouse, but I usually come to the house. After Sam left, Theresa explored the house more thoroughly. It was indeed well-maintained but Spartan, lacking the small touches that made a house a home. The pantry was well-stocked with basics: flour, sugar, coffee, preserved meats, and canned vegetables, but lacked variety. She spent the morning in the vegetable garden, which was indeed neglected but salvageable. Years of city life hadn't prepared her for agricultural work, but she approached it with determination, weeding and assessing what could be saved. At midday, Sam returned as promised, his shirt damp with sweat, dust clinging to his denims. He washed at the pump outside before entering the kitchen, where Theresa had prepared a simple meal of cold meat, bread, and the last of the previous night's beans. Garden's in rough shape, she admitted as they ate, but I think with some work we could have fresh vegetables by late summer. Never had much time for it, Sam confessed. Previous housekeeper, Mrs. Wilkins, used to tend it, but she left to care for her daughter's new baby last fall. Been managing on my own since. You should have mentioned a housekeeper in your letters, Theresa said, surprised. She only came 3 days a week, figured a wife would want to manage her own household. He met her eyes. I wasn't being deceptive, just didn't think to mention it. Theresa nodded, accepting his explanation. Well, I'm glad to have the opportunity to make this place my own, though I may need guidance on what grows well here. Mrs. Henderson at the general store might help, Sam suggested. She keeps a fine garden herself. Next time we're in town, you could speak with her. I'd like that. As Sam prepared to return to work, he paused at the door. Would you like to see the rest of the ranch later? I could take you around before supper. I'd enjoy that very much, Theresa replied, pleased by the invitation. True to his word, Sam returned in the late afternoon with 2 horses saddled and ready. He looked momentarily concerned when he saw Theresa's city-appropriate skirt. Do you ride? He asked. Not recently, she admitted. And never astride. Sam rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. The side saddle is packed away somewhere. For today, would you be comfortable riding with me? The gelding can carry us both easily for a short tour. Theresa hesitated only briefly before nodding. That would be fine. Sam helped her up onto the horse, then mounted behind her, one arm reaching around her to take the reins. The closeness was startling the first time they had been in such proximity, and Theresa felt her pulse quicken at the warmth of him against her back. All right? He asked, his voice close to her ear. Yes, she managed, glad he couldn't see her flushed face. They rode slowly around the property, Sam pointing out the boundaries of his land, the best grazing areas, the creek that provided water year-round. He introduced her to the ranch hand's Jim Ellison, a grizzled older man with a perpetual squint, Pete Donovan, a good-natured redhead barely out of his teens, and Miguel Vasquez, who tipped his hat politely and offered a welcome in accented English. Miguel's the best with horses I've ever seen, Sam explained as they rode away from the corral. Jim knows cattle better than most, and young Pete's a hard worker, eager to learn. They seem like good men, Theresa observed. They are. Been with me for years, except Pete. He joined last spring. Sam guided the horse toward a ridge overlooking the property. Wanted you to see this before the light fades. From the vantage point, the entire ranch spread before them, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The house and outbuildings looked small against the vastness of the land, which rolled away toward distant mountains. It's beautiful, Theresa breathed. First time my father brought me up here, I was maybe 10 years old, Sam said, his voice soft with memory. Told me to look at everything the light touched and remember it was our responsibility to care for it. Not just own it, but care for it. He fell silent, and Theresa sensed the depth of his connection to this land. Thank you for showing me, she said quietly. Sam cleared his throat. We should head back, getting near supper time. The return ride was quiet but comfortable. As they approached the house, Theresa found herself reluctant for this closeness to end. Sam helped her dismount, his hands strong at her waist, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "I'll tend to the horse," he said. "Be in shortly." Over the next days, they settled into a routine. Theresa took charge of the household, making small improvements where she could. She repaired curtains, polished neglected furniture, and brought order to chaotic cupboards. The garden began to respond to her attention, and she started planning how to expand it the following spring. Sam seemed to appreciate her efforts, commenting on the changes with quiet approval. Their evening conversations grew longer, more personal. He told her about growing up on the ranch, the hard years after his mother died when he was 12, the pride he felt when his father entrusted him with more responsibility. Theresa shared stories of her own childhood in Boston, her education at a respectable girls' school, and her love of literature. She spoke carefully around the painful last years with her father, whose gambling had intensified after her mother's death. But Sam seemed to understand there were wounds there still healing. On her 5th evening at the ranch, as they sat by the fireplace with cups of tea, Sam broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "Been thinking about when we might hold the wedding," he said, his eyes on the flames rather than her face. "Preacher comes through town every 3rd Sunday." "That's a week from now." Theresa set down her cup, her heart suddenly racing. "That soon?" Sam glanced at her, then back at the fire. "If you need more time, I understand. Just thought it might be best to formalize things. People talk." "Are they talking already?" Theresa asked, alarmed. "Don't know that they are. Just know that they will. A single man and woman living under the same roof." He hesitated. "Unless you've changed your mind entirely." "No," Theresa said quickly. "I haven't changed my mind. She took a breath. "It's happening rather faster than I anticipated." Sam nodded, his expression unreadable in the firelight. "Like I said, no rush if you're not ready." "No, you're right," Theresa decided. "We should formalize our arrangement. Next Sunday would be fine." Relief flickered across Sam's features. "We can ride into town Saturday, get you anything you might need. Not much selection at Henderson's store, but they've got basics." "I'd like that," Theresa said. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "Sam, may I ask something personal?" He looked at her directly now, curious. "Of course." "Why did you decide to advertise for a wife? She hesitated, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "You're a handsome man with a good property. Surely there were local women who would have been interested." Sam was quiet for so long that Theresa feared she had overstepped. Finally, he set down his cup and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Tried that route once," he said, his voice low. "Was engaged to a girl from town, Emily Watson. Her father owned the mercantile before Henderson bought it. We were to be married 5 years ago." Theresa waited, sensing there was more to the story. "There was an influenza outbreak that winter. Hit the town hard. Emily and her mother both took sick." He stared into the fire. "They didn't recover." "I'm so sorry," Theresa whispered. Sam shrugged, the motion stiff with old pain. "After that, didn't much see the point in courting. Threw myself into the ranch, then my father passed and there was even more work." He glanced at her. "But a man gets tired of coming home to empty rooms." The honesty of it touched Theresa deeply. On impulse, she reached out and placed her hand over his. "Thank you for telling me." His fingers tightened briefly around hers, the first deliberately affectionate gesture he had made. "Should turn in," he said after a moment. "Early start tomorrow." That night, Theresa lay awake longer than usual, thinking about Sam's revelation. His grief explained much about his reserve, his caution in forming new attachments. She found herself wanting to bring warmth back into his life, to make this house truly a home for both of them. The next morning brought unexpected excitement. Theresa was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard shouts from the direction of the barn. Looking out the window, she saw Sam and Miguel running toward one of the corrals, where a horse was rearing and bucking violently. Without thinking, she rushed outside, stopping at a safe distance as the men attempted to calm the panicked animal. It was a magnificent bay stallion, muscles rippling beneath its gleaming coat as it fought against the ropes Miguel was using to try to control it. "What's happening?" Theresa called to Pete, who was watching from the fence. New stallion broke loose during training, Pete explained, his eyes never leaving the dangerous scene. Mean cuss, that one. Sam thought he could gentle him, but he's fighting every step. As they watched, the horse reared again, hooves slashing the air. Sam moved quickly, but not quickly enough. One hoof caught him on the shoulder, sending him stumbling backward. Miguel shouted something in Spanish and managed to loop a rope around the stallion's neck, finally bringing it under some semblance of control. Theresa rushed forward as Sam pushed himself to his feet, his face pale beneath his tan. "Are you hurt?" she asked, reaching for him instinctively. "Just a knock," he said, though he winced when he tried to move his arm. "Nothing broken. You should let me look at it," Theresa insisted. "It could be worse than you think." Sam hesitated, then nodded. "Let me help Miguel secure that beast first." "I have him, boss," Miguel called. "Go with your lady." In the kitchen, Theresa had Sam sit while she examined his shoulder. She had to help him remove his shirt, an intimate task that left them both slightly flustered. "It's already bruising," she observed, gently probing the injury. A dark purple mark was spreading across his upper arm and shoulder. "But I don't think anything's broken. You'll be sore for days, though." "Had worse," Sam said, though he couldn't quite suppress a hiss of pain when she touched a particularly tender spot. Theresa prepared a cold compress and bound it to his shoulder with strips of clean cloth. "You should rest it today," she advised. Sam gave her a look that clearly communicated what he thought of that suggestion. "Got work that won't wait." "At least let the men handle the heaviest tasks," Theresa pleaded. "You'll heal faster if you don't push yourself." Something in her expression must have reached him because his objection faded. "I suppose some things could wait a day or two," he conceded. Theresa felt an unexpected surge of emotion at his acquiescence. He was letting her care for him, trusting her concern. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt significant. Sam stayed closer to the house that day, attending to paperwork and repairs that didn't require much lifting. Theresa found herself checking on him frequently, bringing him coffee or simply pausing to talk as she went about her chores. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold, Sam broke a comfortable silence. "Thank you," he said simply, "for tending to my shoulder." "Of course," Theresa replied. "That's what." She hesitated, unsure what to call herself. Not yet his wife, but more than a housekeeper or guest. "What family does," Sam finished for her, his voice low but clear in the evening stillness. The word hung between them, full of meaning. Family was what they were creating here, what they both had lacked for too long. "Yes," Theresa agreed softly. "That's exactly what family does." Saturday came quickly, and Theresa found herself increasingly nervous about the trip to town. It would be her first public appearance with Sam since her arrival, and she knew curious eyes would be watching, judgments being formed. She wore her best remaining dress, a forest green poplin with modest lace at the collar and cuffs. It was somewhat outdated by Boston standards, but still presentable. She pinned her hair carefully and added her mother's small cameo brooch, the one possession she had refused to sell even in the darkest days after her father's death. Sam had hitched the wagon and was waiting when she came downstairs. He looked up as she entered, and something in his expression made her pause. "You look beautiful," he said, the compliment clearly unplanned. "Thank you," Theresa replied, pleased by his reaction. "Is this appropriate for town?" "More than appropriate." He offered his hand to help her into the wagon. "You'll outshine every woman there." The ride to Timber Creek was pleasant, the day warm but not oppressively hot. Theresa found herself enjoying the simple pleasure of being beside Sam, their conversation flowing more naturally now. As they approached town, however, her nervousness returned. "Will we need to explain our situation to everyone we meet?" she asked. Sam shook his head. "News travels fast out here. Everyone in town likely knows I sent for a bride and that you arrived last week. Some will be curious, but most will be polite enough not to pry directly. And the wedding, should we make arrangements today?" "Already sent word to Preacher Gallagher that we'd like to meet him after services tomorrow," Sam replied. "Figured we could discuss details then." The general store was their first stop. Mrs. Henderson, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, greeted them warmly. "So you're the young lady who's tamed our Sam Tucker," she said, beaming at Theresa. "We've all been wondering when he'd bring you to town." "Hardly tamed, Mrs. Henderson," Sam said with a wry smile, "just showing Miss Parker what passes for civilization out here." "Well, you've chosen well, Sam," Mrs. Henderson declared, appraising Theresa with obvious approval. "She's got a good look about her, strong but gentle, just what a rancher needs in a wife." Theresa thanked the shopkeeper for the compliment, though she found the frank assessment somewhat disconcerting. As they selected various items, fabric for curtains, some spices Theresa had missed, seeds for the garden, she became aware of other customers entering the store, their curious glances barely concealed. Sam seemed oblivious to the attention, but Theresa knew he wasn't. He placed himself slightly ahead of her when a group of men entered, his posture subtly protective. When he stepped away to examine some tools, Mrs. Henderson leaned close to Theresa. "Don't mind the gawkers, dear," she said quietly. "They're just surprised to see Sam Tucker with a lady." "After Emily, we all thought he'd never marry." "He told me about Emily," Theresa replied softly. "It was a terrible tragedy." Mrs. Henderson nodded solemnly. "Nearly broke him, but you've clearly brought something good back into his life. I haven't seen him this at ease in years." Before Theresa could respond, the store door opened again, and a well-dressed woman entered, followed by a man in an expensive suit. Something in Sam's posture immediately stiffened. "Victoria," he acknowledged with a curt nod. "Judge Blackwood." "Samuel," the woman replied, her voice cultured and cool. "What a surprise to see you in town on a Saturday." "Showing my fiancé around," Sam said, moving to Theresa's side. "Theresa, this is Victoria Mercer and Judge Howard Blackwood, your fiancé." Victoria repeated, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising as she assessed Theresa from head to toe. "How unexpected. A pleasure to meet you," Theresa said politely, ignoring the woman's barely concealed disdain. "Miss Parker is from Boston," Sam added, his hand coming to rest lightly on Theresa's back. "We're to be married tomorrow." Judge Blackwood extended his hand. "Congratulations are in order then. Welcome to Timber Creek, Miss Parker." Victoria's smile remained fixed. "Indeed." Such a quick courtship. One might almost think it was arranged. The emphasis she placed on the last word made her meaning clear, and Theresa felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Not all of us need years of deliberation to recognize a good match, Victoria," Sam replied, his tone deceptively mild but with an edge Theresa hadn't heard before. Victoria's smile tightened. "Of course not. Well, we shouldn't keep you from your errands. Come, Howard." She took the judge's arm and moved toward the back of the store. Once they were out of earshot, Theresa glanced questioningly at Sam. "An old acquaintance. Victoria was Emily's cousin," Sam explained quietly. "Had her eye on the ranch even back then. After Emily passed, she made it clear she was available. I wasn't interested." "She seems to have found a suitable alternative," Theresa observed, nodding toward the judge. "Blackwood's the wealthiest man in the county, owns half the businesses in town." Sam's expression was grim. Victoria always did know how to improve her situation. They finished their shopping quickly after that, Sam clearly eager to leave before any further encounters. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Theresa noticed Victoria watching from the store window, her expression calculating. "Don't let her bother you," Sam said, noticing the direction of Theresa's gaze. "Victoria enjoys creating discomfort, always has." "She doesn't bother me," Theresa assured him, though it wasn't entirely true. The woman's obvious disdain had stung, reinforcing her sense of being an outsider. Sam surprised her by taking her hand as he helped her into the wagon, holding it a moment longer than necessary. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "Thank you." The simple acknowledgement warmed her more than she expected. "I've dealt with difficult women before," she replied with a small smile. "Boston society has its share of Victoria Mercers." Sam laughed, a genuine sound that Theresa realized she hadn't heard often enough. "I expect it does at that." Their next stop was the dressmaker's shop, where Sam insisted Theresa select fabric for a new dress. "For tomorrow," he explained, "something special for the occasion." Theresa protested the expense, but Sam was firm. Been saving for a proper wedding, he said. Might not be much by Boston standards, but I want to do this right. The dressmaker, Mrs. Calloway, promised to work through the night to have a simple but elegant dress ready by morning. Theresa selected a pale blue fabric that reminded her of Sam's eyes, a thought she kept to herself. Their final stop was the small hotel that housed the town's only restaurant. As they entered the dining room, Theresa was acutely aware of the conversations that momentarily paused, the eyes that tracked their progress to a table by the window. "Word travels fast," she murmured to Sam. "Told you it would," he replied, holding her chair. "Just be yourself, they'll lose interest soon enough." The meal was surprisingly good, and Theresa found herself relaxing as Sam pointed out various town residents, sharing small anecdotes about each. He had a keen eye for character and a dry wit that made her laugh more than once. As they were finishing dessert, a passable apple pie, the restaurant door opened, and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a sheriff's badge entered. He spotted Sam immediately and approached their table with a broad smile. "Thought that was your wagon out front," he said, clapping Sam on the shoulder. "About time you showed your face in town. Been busy at the ranch," Sam replied, standing to greet the man. "Sheriff Daniel Harding, this is Theresa Parker, my fiancée. Theresa, Dan and I grew up together." "His father's ranch borders mine to the east, Miss Parker," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. Heard Sam had finally found himself a bride, didn't quite believe it until now. "Sheriff Harding," Theresa acknowledged with a smile. "I'm beginning to think the entire town has been waiting for this introduction." Daniel laughed. "You've got that right. Sam's been the most eligible bachelor in the county for years. Broke a few local hearts when word got out he'd sent east for a wife." "Don't exaggerate, Dan," Sam said, though he looked more amused than annoyed. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" Daniel asked. "Promise not to overstay my welcome." Over coffee, Daniel proved to be a charming conversationalist with a fund of embarrassing stories about Sam's younger days. "Did he tell you about the time he tried to ride Old Man Johnson's bull?" Daniel asked, eyes twinkling. "He neglected to mention that particular adventure," Theresa replied, enjoying Sam's obvious discomfort. "I was 15, Sam protested, "and you were the one who dared me." "Still did it though, didn't you? Broke your arm and 2 ribs, as I recall." Their easy camaraderie revealed a side of Sam that Theresa hadn't fully seen before, less reserved, more willing to laugh at himself. She found herself warming to both men, grateful that Sam had at least one close friend in his life. As they prepared to leave, Daniel pulled Sam aside briefly. Theresa couldn't hear their conversation, but she noticed Sam's expression grow serious. When he rejoined her, however, he smiled reassuringly. "Just some ranch business," he explained as he helped her into the wagon. "Nothing to worry about." The ride home was quiet, both of them tired from the day's activities. As the ranch came into view, glowing golden in the late afternoon light, Theresa felt a surprising surge of emotion. In just a week, this place had begun to feel like home in a way her father's house in Boston never had, especially in those last difficult years. "Sam," she said suddenly, "I want you to know that I'm glad I came. Whatever happens tomorrow and after, I don't regret answering your advertisement." Sam glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the sunset. "I'm glad to hear that," he said simply. "Very glad indeed." Sunday dawned clear and bright, a perfect September morning. Theresa woke early, a flutter of nerves in her stomach. Today she would become Mrs. Samuel Tucker, wife to a man she had known for barely more than a week, yet as she dressed in the new blue gown Mrs. Calloway had delivered late the previous evening, she felt surprisingly calm. In their short time together, she had come to respect Sam deeply, his integrity, his quiet strength, his devotion to his land and the people who depended on him. That was a foundation they could build on. Sam had given her privacy to prepare, saying he would get ready in the spare room. When she descended the stairs, he was waiting in the parlor, dressed in what was clearly his best suit. It was somewhat outdated and a little tight across his shoulders, but the sight of him made her breath catch nonetheless. "You look beautiful," he said, echoing his words from the day before, but with greater depth of feeling. "Thank you," she replied, straightening his slightly crooked tie. You look very handsome yourself." For a moment they stood close, the reality of what they were about to do hanging between them. Then Sam cleared his throat and offered his arm. "Shall we?" he asked. "Don't want to be late for our own wedding." The small white church was already half full when they arrived. Word had clearly spread about the ceremony, bringing out the curious as well as those genuinely wishing to support Sam. Theresa recognized Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Calloway, both beaming with approval. Sheriff Harding stood near the front, and Sam's ranch hands had cleaned up impressively for the occasion. Victoria Mercer and Judge Blackwood were also present, seated toward the back, their expressions inscrutable. Theresa refused to let their presence dampen her spirits. Preacher Gallagher, a kind-faced man with silver hair, met them at the church door. "Ready, you two?" he asked with a warm smile. Sam glanced at Theresa, a question in his eyes. She nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. The ceremony was simple and brief. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other until death parted them. When Sam placed a simple gold band on her finger, his mother's, he had explained the night before. His hands were steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Preacher Gallagher declared. "You may kiss your bride, Samuel." For a heartbeat, Theresa thought Sam might simply nod and step back. They had not discussed this part of the ceremony, and they had yet to share any physical affection beyond the brief touch of hands. But then he stepped forward, one hand coming up to gently cup her cheek. His kiss was tender, almost reverent, and over far too quickly. "Mrs. Tucker," he whispered as he drew back, the name a promise on his lips. The small congregation erupted in applause, led enthusiastically by Sheriff Harding. Mrs. Henderson was openly weeping, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. What followed was a whirlwind of congratulations and well wishes. Even Victoria approached, offering a cool smile and perfunctory congratulations before sweeping out with Judge Blackwood. Her departure seemed to relax Sam visibly. "Shall we head home?" he asked after the last well-wishers had offered their congratulations. "The hands prepared a small celebration for us." "That was thoughtful of them," Theresa said, touched by the gesture. The small celebration proved to be quite elaborate by ranch standards. Miguel had prepared a feast of traditional Mexican dishes, while Jim had decorated the porch with wildflowers and colored ribbons. Young Pete had polished the silver until it gleamed and set the table with a care that suggested hours of effort. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," Sam said, clearly moved by his men's efforts. "It's not every day the boss gets hitched," Jim replied with a grin. "Besides, gives us a chance to welcome the new Mrs. Proper-like." The meal was joyful, filled with stories and laughter. Theresa found herself relaxing completely, touched by the genuine affection these men clearly had for Sam and their immediate acceptance of her as part of their small community. As the sun began to set, the hands tactfully withdrew to the bunkhouse, leaving the newlyweds alone. An awkward silence fell as they cleared the last of the dishes, both acutely aware of what traditionally followed a wedding day. "I meant what I said before," Sam finally spoke, his voice low. "There's no rush for anything. We're still getting to know each other." Theresa felt a rush of gratitude for his consideration, but also a surprising twinge of disappointment. "Thank you," she said carefully, "but we are married now. I'm not afraid of what that entails." Sam looked at her directly, his eyes searching hers. "I don't want you to ever feel obligated, Theresa. That's not the kind of marriage I'm hoping for." "What kind are you hoping for?" she asked softly. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "One based on mutual respect, partnership, maybe in time genuine affection," he hesitated. "I've come to care for you already, more than I expected possible in such a short time, but I want you to be sure." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. This man, who had endured loss and loneliness, was offering her not just his name and protection, but the possibility of something much more valuable, a true marriage of hearts. "I care for you too, Sam," she admitted. "I didn't expect it either, but I do." Something shifted in his expression, a cautious hope replacing uncertainty. He stepped closer, one hand coming up to touch her cheek as it had during their wedding kiss. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Theresa nodded, her heart beating rapidly as he leaned down to kiss her. Unlike the brief ceremonial kiss in the church, this one lingered, deepening as she responded to him. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and she felt the solid strength of him against her. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach," he confessed. "Why did you wait so long?" Theresa asked, smiling up at him. "Didn't want to frighten you off," he replied with a wry smile. "Figured a strange man stealing kisses might send you running back to Boston on the next stage." Theresa laughed softly. "I'm made of sterner stuff than that, Samuel Tucker." "I'm beginning to see that, Mrs. Tucker." He kissed her again, briefly but with unmistakable promise. "Shall we go upstairs?" That night, Theresa discovered that Sam's gentleness extended to the most intimate aspects of marriage. He was patient, tender, allowing her to set the pace of their lovemaking. When they finally lay together in the afterglow, his arms around her and her head on his chest, she felt a deep contentment she had never known before. "Theresa," Sam murmured, his voice drowsy. "Are you happy?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Very happy." It was, she realized, the simple truth. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Theresa took charge of the household, bringing order and warmth to rooms that had been merely functional before her arrival. The vegetable garden thrived under her care, and she began planning expansions for the following spring. Sam included her in discussions about the ranch, valuing her perspective and quick intelligence. Though she knew little about cattle ranching, she learned quickly, and her suggestions about record-keeping and financial management proved immediately valuable. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, sometimes reading aloud from Sam's books, sometimes simply talking. These quiet hours became precious to both of them, a time to share thoughts and dreams they had never voiced to another soul. Their physical relationship deepened alongside their emotional connection. Sam proved to be a considerate and passionate husband, and Theresa discovered a sensual side of herself she had never been allowed to acknowledge in Boston society. October brought cooler weather and preparations for winter. The ranch hands, under Sam's direction, repaired buildings, stored hay, and moved cattle to protected pastures. Theresa canned the last of the garden's produce, ordered supplies for the winter months, and learned to make soap from rendered fat and lye, a practical skill no Boston finishing school had thought to teach. It was during these busy days that Sheriff Harding paid an unexpected visit. Theresa was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard the sound of horses approaching. Looking out the window, she saw Daniel dismounting, his expression serious as Sam went out to meet him. The two men spoke for several minutes, their conversation too low for Theresa to hear. Sam's posture grew increasingly tense, his hands clenched at his sides. Finally, he nodded curtly and walked Daniel back to his horse. After the sheriff departed, Sam remained standing in the yard for a long moment before returning to the house. "Is everything all right?" Theresa asked as he entered the kitchen. Sam hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell her. "Some trouble brewing," he finally said. "Dan wanted to warn me." "What kind of trouble?" Theresa pressed, setting aside the dough she had been kneading. Sam sighed and sat at the table. "Judge Blackwood's been buying up land all around the county. Apparently he's set his sights on the Silver Spur next. Can he do that? Just take your land?" "Not legally, no, but Blackwood has influence." Sam's expression darkened. "Dan heard rumors he's trying to challenge my water rights. Without access to the creek, this ranch wouldn't survive a single summer." "But you said your father established those rights 20 years ago," Theresa protested. "He did, but Blackwood's claiming the documentation is incomplete." Sam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Theresa had learned indicated deep frustration. "It's nonsense, but he's got the law on his side or thinks he does. What can we do?" The simple we seemed to strengthen Sam. He reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to ride to the county seat tomorrow, check the records myself. If there's any question about the documentation, I need to know exactly what we're facing." "I'll come with you," Theresa offered immediately. Sam shook his head. "It's a hard 2-day ride each way. I need to move fast." Then I'll manage things here, she said firmly. You've shown me enough of the operations. Between Miguel and me, we can keep everything running for a few days. The gratitude in Sam's eyes warmed her. You're remarkable, you know that, he said softly. When I sent for a bride, I never expected someone like you. What did you expect? Theresa asked, genuinely curious, someone practical, hopefully hardworking. He smiled wryly, maybe a bit desperate, willing to marry a stranger for security. Well, I was desperate, Theresa admitted. And I did marry a stranger. And now, Sam asked, a hint of vulnerability in his question. Now I'm married to the man I love, Theresa said simply, and I'll fight alongside him to protect our home. Sam's eyes widened slightly at her declaration, the first time either of them had spoken of love. He stood and pulled her to her feet, gathering her into his arms. I love you too, he murmured against her hair. God help me, I didn't expect to, not so soon, but I do. Their kiss was fierce with emotion, a sealing of the bond that had grown between them. When they separated, both were slightly breathless. I should leave at first light, Sam said, reluctantly practical again. Sooner I get to the county records, sooner I can be back. I'll have provisions ready, Theresa promised, and I'll keep everything running smoothly while you're gone. Sam departed before dawn the next morning after a tender farewell that left Theresa both worried and determined. She explained the situation to Miguel, who immediately pledged his support. The boss is a good man, he said firmly. We will not let this judge take what is not his. The first day of Sam's absence passed uneventfully. Theresa divided her time between household chores and checking on ranch operations. Miguel reported that all was well with the cattle, and Jim had repaired a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. The second day brought unexpected visitors. Theresa was hanging laundry when she heard the approach of a carriage. Walking around to the front of the house, she was surprised to see Victoria Mercer descending from an elegant buggy, followed by Judge Blackwood himself. Mrs. Tucker, Victoria called, her voice falsely sweet. I hope we're not intruding. Miss Mercer, Judge Blackwood, Theresa acknowledged, keeping her tone neutral. This is unexpected. We were passing by and thought we'd pay a social call, Victoria explained, though the nearest property was miles away, making the casual nature of the visit highly implausible. How kind, Theresa replied, not bothering to hide her skepticism. I'm afraid my husband is away on business. Perhaps you'd like to return when he's home, actually, Judge Blackwood interjected smoothly. It might be better to discuss certain matters without Samuel present. May we come in? Theresa hesitated, instinctively wary. But refusing hospitality would only make her appear intimidated, which she refused to be in her own home. Of course, she said, leading them into the parlor. May I offer you refreshment? No need, Blackwood said, settling into Sam's favorite chair without invitation. This won't take long. Victoria remained standing, moving to examine the bookshelves with exaggerated interest. You've made some changes to the place, she observed. Though it's still rather rustic, Theresa ignored the barb. What matters did you wish to discuss, Judge Blackwood? She asked directly. I'll be blunt, Mrs. Tucker. Your husband's ranch is in a precarious position. Blackwood's tone was reasonable, almost regretful. The water rights documentation is, shall we say, incomplete. In a court of law, his claim might not hold. I find that difficult to believe, Theresa replied calmly. The Tucker family has operated this ranch for 20 years without any question of their rights. Previous administrations may have been less thorough in examining the legal details, Blackwood said with a dismissive wave. But the law is the law. And you, as a judge, are naturally concerned with upholding it, Theresa observed, unable to keep the sarcasm from her voice. Blackwood's smile tightened. Indeed, however, I'm not unsympathetic to the Tucker's situation. That's why I've come with an offer. An offer. Theresa repeated, her guard rising further. I'm prepared to purchase the Silver Spur Ranch for a fair price, Blackwood stated. It would spare your husband the expense and uncertainty of a legal battle he's likely to lose. You could return to civilization Boston, perhaps, with enough funds to establish yourselves comfortably. The audacity of the proposal momentarily struck Theresa speechless. Victoria, watching closely, mistook her silence for consideration. It's really the most sensible solution, Mrs. Tucker, she added. A woman of your background can't possibly be content in this wilderness. Think how much more suitable life would be back east with proper society and comforts. Theresa found her voice. Judge Blackwood, miss. Mercer, I appreciate your concern for our welfare, but I'm afraid you've wasted your journey. The Silver Spur is not for sale, not now, not ever. Mrs. Tucker, Theresa. Blackwood leaned forward, his tone hardening. You don't understand the position you're in. Without valid water rights, this land is worthless. I'm offering a generous solution to what could become a very unpleasant situation. My husband is examining those records as we speak, Theresa replied, rising to her feet. If there's any discrepancy, I'm confident it can be resolved without selling our home. Your husband, Victoria interjected, her voice dripping with disdain, is a stubborn fool who doesn't know when he's beaten. Don't let his pride destroy your future, Theresa. Anger flashed through Theresa, hot and fierce. My husband is an honorable man defending what is rightfully his, and I stand with him completely. She moved to the door, opening it pointedly. Now, I believe our discussion is concluded. Blackwood rose slowly, his expression darkening. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Tucker, one you may regret. The only mistake would be abandoning our home to intimidation, Theresa replied evenly. Good day, Judge Blackwood, Miss Mercer. After their unwelcome visitors departed, Theresa found herself trembling with a mixture of anger and concern. Blackwood's confidence suggested he had some leverage she didn't understand. She needed to warn Sam, but he was already on his way to the county seat. That evening, she confided the visit to Miguel, who listened with a grave expression. The judge, he is a powerful man, Miguel acknowledged. But the boss, he is smart, he will find a way. I hope so, Theresa said. I've never seen a man so determined to take something that isn't his. Some men, they never have enough, Miguel replied philosophically, always wanting more land, more power. But they do not understand that a home, it is not just land, it is heart, and you cannot steal someone's heart. His simple wisdom comforted Theresa as she waited anxiously for Sam's return. 4 days after his departure, a day later than expected, Theresa heard the sound of a horse approaching at speed. She rushed onto the porch to see Sam dismounting, his clothes dusty from the trail, his face grim with exhaustion. Sam, she called, hurrying to meet him. Are you all right? He gathered her in his arms, holding her tightly for a long moment before responding. I am now, he said, his voice rough with fatigue. Inside, after he had washed away the trail dust and eaten, Sam explained what he had discovered. Blackwood was partly right, he admitted. There is a problem with the documentation. When my father registered his water claim, the county clerk failed to properly record the northern boundary. It creates a technical loophole that Blackwood is trying to exploit. He came here while you were gone, Theresa informed him, explaining the judge's visit and offer. Sam's expression hardened. Didn't waste any time, did he? Must have known exactly what I'd find. He reached for Theresa's hand. You did right to send him packing. I was worried I might have made things worse, she confessed. He seemed quite confident about his position. He would be, Sam said grimly, but he's not the only one with connections. I spoke with a lawyer in the county seat, a man who knew my father. He believes we can petition for a correction to the record based on 20 years of established use. It won't be easy, but we have a fighting chance. What can I do to help? Theresa asked immediately. Sam's expression softened. You're already doing it. Standing with me, defending our home while I was away. He squeezed her hand. I couldn't ask for a better partner in this fight. The next few weeks were tense as legal maneuvers began. Blackwood filed a formal challenge to the Tuckers' water rights, necessitating a hearing before a circuit judge. Sam spent long hours with their lawyer, gathering evidence of the ranch's historical water usage and statements from neighboring ranchers supporting their claim. Theresa threw herself into supporting these efforts, organizing documents, copying statements, and maintaining the ranch's operations while Sam was occupied with the legal battle. Her education and organizational skills proved invaluable, impressing even their skeptical lawyer. Your wife's a formidable ally, Tucker, he commented after Theresa had identified a crucial discrepancy in Blackwood's filing. Boston's loss is certainly Colorado's gain. The hearing was scheduled for mid-November, requiring another journey to the county seat. This time, Theresa accompanied Sam, despite the increasingly cold weather making travel uncomfortable. The county courthouse was an imposing stone building, its formality at odds with the frontier town surrounding it. Inside, Theresa felt a flutter of anxiety as she saw Blackwood and Victoria already seated, looking confident and well-prepared. "Don't let them intimidate you," Sam whispered, sensing her unease. "Remember, truth is on our side." The circuit judge, a stern-faced man named Hollister, called the hearing to order promptly. Blackwood presented his case first, arguing that the flawed boundary description invalidated the Tuckers' exclusive claim to the creek water. "Your Honor, records must be precise," Blackwood argued smoothly. "Without proper documentation, how can we ensure fair distribution of this essential resource? I merely seek to correct an administrative oversight that has allowed one rancher to monopolize water that should benefit multiple properties." When it was their turn, their lawyer methodically presented evidence of the Tuckers' continuous use of the water, statements from neighbors attesting to the established boundaries, and county tax records showing the ranch had been assessed based on the inclusion of the disputed water access. "Furthermore, Your Honor," he concluded, "Judge Blackwood's sudden interest in this technical discrepancy comes only after 20 years of unchallenged use. One must question the timing, particularly in light of his recent land acquisitions surrounding the Tucker property." Judge Hollister remained impassive throughout the presentations, asking occasional clarifying questions but giving no hint of his leanings. As the hearing concluded, he announced he would review the evidence and issue a ruling within 3 days. "What do you think?" Theresa asked their lawyer as they left the courthouse. "Judge Hollister is fair if strict," he replied cautiously. "The evidence is on our side, but Blackwood's technical argument has merit under the letter of the law. It could go either way." They took rooms at the small hotel near the courthouse, neither willing to begin the journey home only to return days later for the verdict. That night, as they lay together in the narrow hotel bed, Theresa felt Sam's tension in the rigid set of his shoulders. "What happens if we lose?" She asked softly, voicing the question they had both avoided. Sam was silent for a long moment. "Without water rights, the ranch can't function," he finally admitted. "We'd have to sell, probably at a fraction of its worth. And then, I don't know," he confessed. "Start over somewhere, I suppose, maybe further north or west, where land is still available." He turned to face her in the darkness. "I'd understand if that's not what you signed on for." Theresa raised herself on one elbow, looking down at him intently. "Samuel Tucker, if you think I married you for your ranch, you haven't been paying attention." Despite his worry, Sam smiled. "No, I married you because you're a good, honorable man who opened his door and his heart to me," Theresa said firmly. "The land matters because it matters to you, because it's your heritage. But if we lose it, we'll face that challenge together." Sam pulled her close, his kiss conveying what words could not: gratitude, love, and the profound relief of knowing he was not alone, whatever came next. The 3 days of waiting seemed interminable. They tried to distract themselves by exploring the small county seat, but the upcoming ruling loomed over every moment. On the 3rd day, they arrived at the courthouse early, finding seats in the front row of the nearly empty courtroom. Blackwood and Victoria entered moments later, taking seats across the aisle. Victoria shot Theresa a smug smile that set her teeth on edge. Judge Hollister entered precisely at 9 o'clock, his expression as unreadable as ever. He shuffled papers for a moment before addressing the court. "Having reviewed the evidence presented in the matter of Blackwood versus Tucker regarding water rights on Silver Creek, I am prepared to render my decision." He paused, adjusting his spectacles. This case presents an unusual situation where the letter of the law conflicts with established practice and community understanding. Theresa felt Sam tense beside her. She reached for his hand, finding it cold with tension. "The technical error in the original filing is undeniable," Hollister continued. "Under strict interpretation, this would invalidate the exclusive claim as stated." Blackwood leaned forward slightly, anticipation evident in his posture. However, the judge went on, the law must also consider equity and intent. The evidence clearly demonstrates that the Tucker family has maintained and utilized these water rights for 20 years without challenge, with the full knowledge and apparent consent of neighboring property owners and county officials. Theresa squeezed Sam's hand, hardly daring to hope. Therefore, I find that, while the original documentation contains a technical flaw, the established usage creates a prior appropriation right that supersedes any new claim. I hereby order the county clerk to amend the original water rights documentation to accurately reflect the boundaries as they have been understood and respected for 2 decades. The relief that flooded through Theresa was so intense she felt momentarily light-headed. Beside her, Sam sat perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might change the judge's mind. Furthermore, Hollister added, his tone hardening slightly, I find Judge Blackwood's attempt to exploit a clerical error to be contrary to the spirit of frontier water law, which prioritizes beneficial use over technical documentation. Case dismissed. Blackwood rose abruptly, his face flushed with anger. Victoria clutched his arm, whispering urgently as they strode from the courtroom without acknowledgement. Congratulations, their lawyer said, shaking Sam's hand vigorously. It's the right decision, though I admit I was concerned given Blackwood's influence. Thank you for your help, Sam replied, still looking slightly dazed. We couldn't have done this without you. Outside the courthouse, in the crisp November sunshine, Sam finally allowed himself to smile. We won, he said, as if testing the reality of the words. We did, Theresa agreed, matching his smile with her own. The silver spur is secure. Sam took her face in his hands, his expression suddenly serious. No, Theresa, what makes the silver spur secure isn't a judge's ruling, it's you. Your strength, your intelligence, your willingness to fight for our home. Our home, Theresa repeated, loving the sound of those simple words. That's worth fighting for. His kiss was tender yet triumphant, a promise of the future they would build together on the land they had defended. The journey back to the ranch was lighter, filled with plans and possibilities now that the shadow of Blackwood's threat had been lifted. As they crested the final rise and saw the silver spur spread before them, golden in the late afternoon light, Theresa felt a surge of profound belonging. It's beautiful, she said softly. Yes, it is, Sam agreed, but he was looking at her rather than the landscape. The ranch hands greeted their return with whoops of celebration when they heard the news, Miguel producing a bottle of tequila he'd been saving for a special occasion. That evening turned into an impromptu victory celebration, with even the taciturn Jim joining in the storytelling and laughter. As winter settled over the Colorado territory, the silver spur settled into a peaceful rhythm. Blackwood and Victoria kept their distance, their ambitions apparently turned elsewhere after their defeat. Sam and Theresa focused on strengthening their ranch and their marriage, each day deepening the bond between them. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell gently outside and a fire crackled in the hearth, Theresa presented Sam with news that brought tears to his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. A baby, he repeated, his voice hoarse with emotion. You're sure? The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday, Theresa said, smiling through her own tears. Due in early summer. Sam gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. I never thought I could be this happy, he confessed. When I placed that advertisement for a bride, I was just looking for someone practical, someone to help run the house. Instead, I found my heart's match. And I found my true home, Theresa replied, resting her head against his chest. Not just a place, but a person to build a life with. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the silver spur in pristine white. Inside, by the warmth of the fire, Sam and Theresa Tucker held each other, surrounded by the love they had found in the most unexpected of ways, a mail-order bride and a lonely rancher, strangers who had become everything to each other. Welcome home, Sam whispered, echoing the words he'd spoken when she first arrived. Now and always. Home, Theresa agreed, knowing that wherever they were, as long as they were together, she would always be home.